2023 FIFA Women's World Cup draw took place. We are officially 9 months out from the 2023 World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. It's going to be taking place July 20th through August 20th across 10 stadiums, 9 host city. And this was really the draw. I really enjoyed it. Because I think we had our jokes. We said, look, for those of us in the United States, depending on where you are on the coasts, it was a late night for both you and I in terms of Eastern times and Central times. But it sort of felt like this first moment for a lot of people who were tuning in, maybe getting introduced to the World Cup that's going to be taking place in Australia and New Zealand. The draw taking place in Auckland, New Zealand specifically. And there was a lot of buildup to the draw, right? Let's maybe talk about that a little bit. They didn't just kick off the show and say, let's pick some eggs. No.
Of course not. Of course not. There's a lot of ceremony, a lot of fanfare that goes around with it. And to host a World Cup is a tremendous honor. And for New Zealand and Australia to be co-hosting it, you could tell from watching this draw that they are just so incredibly proud of their country and what they are putting on at both of their countries, and that they are so excited to share their homes like with the rest of the world coming up in 2023. And that's like the coolest thing to me. Like, yes, Australia and New Zealand is a great place to visit and to go, but the fact that everyone involved in the draw was from either of those countries, and also very like welcoming and warm, and like, we can't wait for you to come visit us. And it was just so exciting to see them. And also they're hyping it up because it is the biggest and the best. And there's no exaggeration there, right? Like when they say that this will be the biggest and the best Women's World Cup ever, like they're not being biased because they're hosting it, because it's expanded teams, right? The last several years, it's only been 24 nations entering the World Cup. This year, we have 32 countries. There are already 29 of those 32 already qualified for the World Cup. The remaining 3 spots will be filled by the Interconfederation playoffs that we talked about last week. That's taking place in February, those playoff games. But because it is the biggest, 32 countries being involved, and it's taking place over 2 countries, like, yes, there should be a lot of pomp and circumstance around this, because this is huge, because the women's game is growing. And I think that was also very, very evident while watching this draw and this hour-long spectacle of what could be the groups and the pots and everything. They also did a great job explaining it. I will say that if anyone, like, we're going to explain it for you here, but if anyone is very, very visual, go like YouTube, whatever Fox put out.
Run it back, right?
Because those little dots that were like moving around and like potting into like the different pots and then the groups, I was like, I'm a visual learner. I'm so here for this. I mean, I knew what was happening, but it was very cool to see, like, when they draw from the pots into the groups, you can't have 2 countries from the same federation in the same pot, minus Europe. And so then they skip, and then we'll go back. I just think they did a fantastic job explaining it all for the like casual fan.
Yeah, I like that. I like that I had those visual components as well, as sort of, had everything moving around. And I'm with you. I think, like everything today, you can usually find things on YouTube, including us, right? People should go ahead and run it back on FIFA's YouTube channel in case they missed out on it, or need that sort of visual explainer, compared to us just sort of running through it and talking about it. But I loved the celebration of it all. I thought there was a lot of moments where it was very respectful and very polite, and it was really cool to sort of see everybody participating in and really trying to showcase the cultures of Australia and New Zealand. And it should have been celebrated, like you said, Lisa. I mean, this is going to be, to date, the largest FIFA Women's World Cup. The World Cup is expanding specifically from this point on. It's gone from, I think it was 24 teams the last time. Now it's 32 teams who are going to be competing. And up until this point, I think the reason why we're also praising the explanation of it all during that live event was there were some moments within it that because there's only 29 of those 32 teams
Right.
are officially qualified at this moment. So there was a few picks within the pots there that were undetermined. They've yet to be decided. So those teams will kind of slot in come February, and they were just simply referred to as playoff Group A winners,
Mhm.
or playoff Group B winners, or playoff Group C winners. So that way, they did have 32 selections to make over the course of the 8 groups. So that's how
Yeah.
it broke down. There were 4 pots of those 32 teams broken down and then divided up ultimately into 8 groups. So Group A through Group H for this draw. And we sort of had a little bit of a preview of how things were going to be seeded potentially because of the FIFA World Cup rankings that had dropped just prior to this event taking
Mhm.
place. So ultimately, alongside the co-hosts, Australia and New Zealand, who were automatically placed in pot one, the highest ranking teams were then, sort of broken up over those 4 pots. So what that meant was that we knew, at least for the United States women's national team, that it meant a tradition was going to be broken. They were not going to face
Yeah.
Sweden, at least in the group stage of this World Cup.
Yeah, for the first time in 5 years that, US and Sweden will not be in the group stage together, which I think was a bit of a sigh of relief, at least for someone like me who knows that that's just, like, such big competition, and there are already so many other nations that the US, um, kind of goes up against and likes to have that competition. So when the FIFA rankings dropped, 2 weeks ago or so, and we knew that the US was first and so on and so forth, we knew that the US and Sweden would be in the same pot. But because Australia and New Zealand were put in that first pot, it meant that teams, Canada was going to be moved to pot two, which perhaps that's I think what some people circled and looked at a little bit too. But yeah, I mean, as this kind of rolled out, it was the first. The teams in pot one that were being picked into their groups were always going to be placed in the first spot of that group, and then so on and so forth. And as it played out, we could as this is what I was doing. So as the United States got placed into their group, as it happened, I was then
Yeah,
checking the World Cup schedule because I was like, okay, now
yeah,
when did they play? Now that we know what group they're in, when did
exactly.
they play? What times? What country are they going to be in?
Yeah.
Which the entire World Cup schedule is out. We'll actually put a link to that in our description for this episode on YouTube, and if you're listening as a podcast. So I'll put that link in the description. That way fans can click on that and actually see the full schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, visual aids, right, are helpful sometimes
Yes.
for folks. But I think that maybe there are folks out there who are wondering, like, well, hey, if the pots were already sort of divided out, and we ultimately knew which teams or how teams were going to be placed out, why did it matter who was, Group A1 or Group A2, excuse me, Group A2, et cetera, et cetera. So every team that got placed into the respective group also got an actual placement. So they were divided into a group and then given a placement. So New Zealand got the honors of being within Group Group A, and then listed as Group A1, and then so on and so on and so forth. And what that did is, as Lisa alluded to, is it basically determined
Mhm.
who was going to be playing who on those opening match days and then throughout the group stages. So that's why there was, selection within the groups and then actual placement for these teams as well. So it was very, very exciting. Let's go through all these 8 groups for folks. They're just like, listen, guys, just stop talking. We want to know who the teams
We
are in
know,
what
we know.
groups. Okay. So let's run through these groups, and then we'll talk a little bit about what that means for the U.S. women's national team. If you're joining us live on YouTube, welcome. You can check out the graphic of the draw results. Start with Group A. We've got co-hosts New Zealand, Norway, Philippines, and Switzerland. Group B, co-hosts Australia, Ireland, Nigeria, and Canada. Group C, Spain, Costa Rica, Zambia, and Japan. And Group D, England, the Group B playoff winner, Denmark, and China.
For Group E, it's the United States, Vietnam, Netherlands, and then the Group A playoff winner. Group F, France, Jamaica, Brazil, and Group C playoff winner. Group G is Sweden, South Africa, Italy, and Argentina. And then rounding out Group H, Germany, Morocco, Colombia, and Korea Republic. So those are our 8 groups, 4 nations in each group. That's how the group stages will play out. The winners will then move on to the knockout rounds and so on and so forth. So as you can see, the United States in Group E, I think Sweden being in Group G. Those are some of the like big ones that I circled at first. Also England being in Group D.
Oh yeah. No, there was honestly like maybe just talking about our reactions to some of this going live. 'Cause I know I was, up and awake and covering it and tweeting through it, of course, and just sort of watching all of the teams get selected into each group. It was exciting because it's like it makes it feel more real, right? We're already
Oh yeah.
sort of talking about how close it is, but I think people are naturally in a tournament like this are looking for, who are going to be the groups that are going to be, what's the group of death, or
Mhm.
who's got maybe the easiest path, or what does that even mean when we're talking about hardest group versus, maybe easiest group, right? So looking at even just listening to you and I both read these back, knowing that there are 3 groups, right, that actually still don't have that full
Mhm.
picture quite yet, I think is also a very interesting component. So we've got, Group D, we've got Group E, and Group F that still are going to be waiting for that fourth team to join them. So, for example, like if you're Group D in England, Denmark, and China, which is already a
Yeah.
very, very competitive group. I think if people are looking for a Group D, D stands for death, maybe this might be the one.
Mhm.
But the possibility that they can also be joined up by either Chile, Senegal, or Haiti continues to make that group, I think, really intriguing to me. Then Group F with France, Jamaica, and Brazil. Again, another potential exciting group here. They could also add into the fold of this either Chinese Taipei, Paraguay, Panama, or Papua New Guinea. And then Group E, which we're going to take a deep dive on because it's the United States Women's National Team group. This group is the United States, Vietnam, and Netherlands. But the fourth team that could join up in this group is either going to be Portugal, Cameroon, or Thailand.
Yeah, I think that that's also, like, adds just so many more layers as to, like, how
Yeah.
competitive this could be, but, I mean, looking at these groups, I think Group D stood out to me, having England, Denmark, and, China in that group, and then as well as one of the playoffs team coming in, I think that could be a really, really challenging group. I also with the schedule and how the World Cup is laid out, it is between 2 different countries and 9 cities, which
Yes.
requires a lot of travel. And looking at some of these groups, some groups, have a I'm gonna say a little bit easier than other groups in terms of
Yeah.
how much they're
Scheduling.
traveling.
Yeah.
How much they're traveling, whether you're going on a 3-hour flight or you're taking, like, an hour bus ride, like, there's just a very big difference between these groups and kind of how they shook out, in terms of where they will be playing their group stage games, whether you're jumping between New Zealand and Australia on a hefty flight with a big travel day in there. But looking at kind of Group B, I think that's also a huge group to look at with
Yeah.
Australia, Ireland,
Yep.
Nigeria, and Canada. Canada, they're gold medalists coming off of the Tokyo Olympics. You have Australia, who's a host country. You have Ireland, that this is their first ever World Cup.
Yeah.
And then you have a team in Nigeria that's incredibly talented. I think that's a group that I initially circled as like, oof, this is
Yeah.
gonna be a really fun group to watch.
When I was reacting to it live, I think anyone who is on Twitter or operates on that ridiculous website, I think when I was reacting to it live, I instinctually was like, I think Group D, or excuse me, Group B could potentially be something like a group of death, just because of the teams who are involved. But for me, it's maybe not necessarily a group of death, but it's more like a bit of group of unpredictability. Because when
Yeah.
we're looking at the four teams within Group B, Australia, Ireland, Nigeria, Canada, there's, I think, question marks around each of those teams that could also sort of be the X factor. So you've got the question marks that are also the X factor. So Australia, on the one hand, their tournament host, right? Their tournament co-host. Is that something that is going to carry this team through the World Cup? Are we going to see the Matildas sort of ride the momentum of being co-hosts
Yeah.
In this World Cup, or are they gonna, fold to pressure? Are they gonna feel like the moment is too big? You have Canada, who are entering this competition as the recent Olympic gold medalists. Will their momentum fade from such a high that they've been on over the course of the last 18 months or so? Nigeria is a constant. They are an ever-present, multi-talented, faceted team. Is their attack going to carry them through this group stage, or will we, see them fade as well? We saw them not too long ago against the United States women's national team. So a couple of competitive matches, but also a team that is similar to the United States, kind of trying to come back from
Mhm.
injury a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And then you've got Ireland, who, again, their question mark and possibly same X factor is the fact that they are debutantes. And like,
Huge question mark, yeah.
you don't know what you're going to get with this team, and that could always provide a surprise as well. So I don't
Uh,
know. Instinctually, it was group of death for me, but now it's more just like group of
yeah,
unpredictability in
group
this
of
World Cup.
chaos, honestly, group of chaos. I mean, you mentioned it, Republic of Ireland, they beat Scotland, or excuse me, they beat Wales, right, to get into, the World Cup, and
Massive.
massive, massive for this country, massive for these players. Like, and I sometimes think that that could really propel a nation to maybe play above their ranking, play above like what they're actually predicted to do. So, Republic of Ireland, just one of five nations making their World Cup debut. In Group A, it's also the Philippines. Group B, we have Republic of Ireland. In Group C, it's Zambia. And then in Group E, it is Vietnam, and then Morocco. Right in Group H, I'm trying to like run through all of my ones that
Yep.
I have.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so five teams: Morocco, Philippines, Republic of Ireland, Vietnam, and Zambia making their first World Cup appearances. And I think like when you look at the groups as to those debutantes, right? Like and the groups that they're in, looking at maybe which ones might struggle the like has the worst path. I think that Republic of Ireland probably has the best path in terms of like what they could do in that group. I think you look at a team like Zambia going up against Japan, Costa Rica, Spain, and that's a tough group for a
Yeah.
new nation in the World Cup at this world stage to go up against those three competitors that have the experience in it. Even a team like Costa Rica that has limited experience at the World Cup, they still have that over a team like Zambia.
Yeah. And it's interesting to sort of think back now how the draw played out, right? You bringing up Costa Rica, and they initially got drawn into Group B, right?
Yeah.
This group that I'm referring to as the group of unpredictability. Uh, but they were unable to stay in Group B because, with the exception of UEFA nations, you could not have the same participating nations from the same region within the same group. So
Mhm.
they got placed into Group C, and then they went ahead and made another pick for Group B. But I don't know. In terms of a group of chaos, I don't know. I hear you going with Group B is maybe a group of chaos, but I'm looking at Group F to be the group of
Mhm.
chaos. Quite frankly, I'm looking at France, Jamaica, and Brazil as those first three that were listed, and the possibility of having either Chinese Taipei, Paraguay, Panama, or Papua New Guinea join the fold. I think even just looking at those first three teams, there's absolutely going to be chaos in
Oh,
this group.
yeah.
I mean, my goodness, just sort of thinking back to the 2019 World Cup, in which France and Brazil sort of gave us that ridiculous round of 16 match. It was a 2-1 win for France. Ended up eliminating Brazil. Marta giving a very iconic
Yep.
speech at this point now after that game. Many people perceive that, hey, like maybe that's her World Cup farewell. I don't know. I think she might have one more in her. But you've got those two teams with a history between each other, but you also have the inclusion of Jamaica as well. And listen, the Reggae Girls are not debutantes this year
Nope.
and have shown that they are a team that can beat you on the right day at the right time. So I'm looking at Group F to be the group of chaos. I'm looking at Group B to be the group of unpredictability, and I think I'm gonna stick with Group D to sort of be that group of death. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for England. I do predict that
Yeah.
they will get through this group stage, but I don't anticipate that it will be easy.
No.
England, Denmark, China, and then the possibility of having either Chile, Senegal, or Haiti. China are entering this World Cup as the winners of the Women's Asian Cup, their World Cup qualifiers. The Steel Roses, in my opinion, have reintroduced themselves into the fold. This is a program that has been working themselves back to try to make sure that they have a relevant presence in international tournaments. And I think this group could reintroduce them even more to a
Right.
much larger and much more vast crowd. So even the possibility of like a team like Haiti
I
entering
know.
the mix of this group, absolutely. I think I'm going Group D as
Yeah.
group of death for
I
me.
agree. I think Group D is incredibly difficult. I mean, you look at the draw results as a whole, and the number one seeding in each of these groups. Like these nations are incredibly difficult to beat and to play. Like New Zealand, Australia, Spain, England, the United States,
Yeah.
France, Sweden, Germany. You look at teams like Canada. You look at. I think the Netherlands are up there as a team that can really compete. It's just is so competitive. And that's also what makes this World Cup incredibly, incredibly special because not only have we expanded to 32 countries, but the overall competition of women's football is increasing. And we have seen that throughout the Euros, throughout the friendlies that we've been watching, throughout the playoff like CONCACAF play-ins and the other regional play-ins for this World Cup. It's incredibly competitive. And that's literally why this World Cup is going to be the best one that we have ever seen.